Hello and welcome to Into Your Life podcast. I'm Lenka and I'm joined here by my wonderful co-host Natalie.
Hi, we invite you to join our weekly conversations about finding more life in one's life.
Well, what does it actually mean?
We have discussions with guests about ways to live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives, both personally and professionally.
That sounds great. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to another episode. Today's guest is someone I've known for a while. We've met at a freelancer co-working and was always intrigued by what is she actually doing? That sounds cool. Is that work? So I'm very, very happy to be able to welcome here Anise Bullimore, who is a resilient coach, but she does it with a twist. She does coaching walks to give you space, feel connected, and support your well-being. That's coaching with a twist. I love that. But as always, the best way to introduce you to someone new is to say, "Hi, Anise, welcome, and tell us a little bit more about you." You can tell it always better than I can.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here and see you and to be with you, Lenka, and meet you, Natalie. So yes, I do resilience coaching and getting people out walking while they do it. So what I'm interested in is supporting people when they're going through stressful times. And that's often when we can feel quite stuck and we can need a bit of space and a bit of support. And so I discovered early on when I started coaching that one of the best ways to do that is to get people out, to get them moving. And pre-pandemic, I only did that in person. I particularly enjoyed getting teams out and groups out, that sort of shared experience and supporting each other as you go. And when the pandemic hit, I thought, eek, that's it. How's this going to work? And I discovered how to do these walks online, and it was so exciting because people were walking across the world, across time zones. Sometimes it was teams that had just never had these kind of conversations or been aware of each other. And so yeah, just getting people out walking, so then they get moving, they start thinking more clearly, they relax a bit, and then you could get into the resilience coaching. So it's specific coaching around well-being, support, setting boundaries, pacing yourself, all that sort of good stuff. And then after that, I even started making recordings. So I am going out for walks with people and I don't even know where I'm going. So I've been playing with all these different ways of doing it. I think there are quite a few walking coaches now and people are doing it more, but maybe not so much with groups, with recordings and across time zones. So yeah, that's what I do.
I love that. You are bringing probably two of my favorite things together. Like, I am excited and passionate about coaching. I appreciate really the magic of coaching, the coaching process. But one thing I'm even more passionate about is nature, is the great outdoors. It's, going out and about and hiking. And I'd love to explore with you a little bit more about what is it about walking coaching? What is it about being in nature? Does it have to be like in the middle of nowhere, in a park, in a forest, by the beach? Like, what is it about the outside that really helps you and your clients to get into the coaching? What is your process of taking people out, if it's in person, if it's in a kind of structured, tailored system, or if it's on your walk? We'd love to go a little deeper into why the hell nature helps. We know nature's good, but in your specific experience, why is nature and outdoors so powerful? And then a little bit more about, well, how do you do that to get people into the state of being more receptive and more open and more calm to then be able to really benefit from coaching a lot more than if they would just be sitting at their butt at the office.
So I think there's quite a few questions in there. Let me just think about the being in nature and being outside first, because yes, there is a lot about that and that benefits us so much. We don't even need to read the science, we just know it. We know it as soon as we get out there and we're doing it. And I'm coming from the perspective that everybody feels better on holiday and everybody feels better out in the forest, but we can't do that most of the time. So I was really interested to think about how can I bring coaching to where you need it so that it's part of your day, it's part of your life. Because I think too often okay, not everybody gets to go on yoga retreats, for example, or even just go for a long hike, but obviously then you do feel good. But what you want is to be able to make it part of your day so that you're feeling good all day, so that you are thinking about your well-being and how you can keep going. So I'm really interested in how we can walk where we are at. Sometimes that will mean that people are close enough that they can go out into the woods that aren't near them. When they're speaking to me, it may be that to go somewhere quite remote, your reception doesn't work as well, so that might not be possible. But you could also go for a walk down your street, around your room, around your garden. So just that fact of moving, of being in a different environment helps you think differently, think more openly, get out of, again, that sort of being stuck. And I don't just mean stuck not moving, but sort of stuck like on a roller coaster, stuck going fast, stuck doing the habits that often make you feel worse and more tired and more stressed. So yeah, I would hugely advocate going for big long walks. I'm a big fan of them myself, but if you can just go for a walk for 5 minutes around your room, around your street, that could make a real difference as well. I think there was more in your question about the process, maybe.
Yeah, there was a bit about, okay, so you get an individual, let's work on your resilience and well-being. You get a team, let's explore. Okay, you take them out, let's go for a walk. Is that it? Or tell us a little bit more about the process of how you weave in the nature and the walks into then obviously the coaching process.
Yeah, how it sort of all comes together. So I think there's three main elements of how I run all of my sessions, whether they're one-to-one or with a group or with a team. And the first is giving that space. And so that could include being mindful, just being a bit aware of the world around you, breathing, noticing how you're feeling. This is a huge issue with stress and also resilience, is just not checking in with where you're at and what's going on for you, and not even realizing that you're stressed or hungry, tired, whatever it is that's going on, we're just not tuned into it. So that's the first element that continues throughout, is having that space. And then the next element is all around making sure people are feeling connected, because that's another major thing that happens as soon as we feel stressed, is we can feel a bit isolated, a bit alone. So giving that opportunity to share experiences, asking some of those different questions of people so that they're just thinking, how am I working? What is working for me right now? What could I do differently? What do I find hard to do? And then the third element is more about giving that support. I would say I'm gentle, but challenging. So I think when you're feeling quite stressed and overloaded, you can feel quite fragile. And so it's important not to come in and make people feel attacked, because there's something about well-being, isn't there, especially with the way social media is, that sort of, oh, I should be doing this and I should be doing that, and I'm not, because I've got so much going on. So I think it's quite important to start with saying you are where you're at, you're doing the best that you can in the situation, and then we're thinking about how can you do things differently, and coming up with actions. Again, not this big long to-do list of should be doing this and I should be doing that, but maybe that one or two major things that could make a difference. And so part of my trainings come from Resilience Dynamic. They're really wonderful. So they have a specific set of models and research around resilience. And what they're talking about is resilience being our capacity for change. So it's more about a flexibility in the face of change, and how we can be creative and flexible when things happen. I mean, how wonderful if we can be like that. And so recognizing that when our energy is very low, we're in a different place and we have to use a different set of tools. So that is much more about real self-care, I suppose, but also those secure bases, making sure you're doing things that make you feel good and feeling supported. And it's not until your energy is a bit higher and you've been a bit more supported that then you can start thinking about boundaries in particular. That's huge. People find it really hard to justify asking for what they need, knowing what they need, having those difficult conversations, pacing ourselves as well. The sort of we just keep going even when we know it's not helping us, those sorts of things. So then you can sort of gently, but in a sort of challenging way, work around that and coming away with a specific action that they have decided. There's no point me telling people what to do, that they have decided that works. So yeah, those three elements: giving that space, feeling that connection, either just to me and themselves or to their team and their group, and then offering that support and action so that you're really changing things. There you go.
Maybe a bit silly question or unimportant, but as you were talking about the ability then to handle change and not resist, but resist being angsty around change and kind of allow it to happen. I'm curious, well, it's nice to go out for a coaching walk when the weather is nice, but in the UK particularly, not ideal to easy to plan to good weather. So how do you then handle change and people handle change when it comes to, let's go for this team building coaching walk and it's pissing down rain or it's just windy or it's just meh. So is that part of the dynamic of the coaching? Do you somehow kind of infuse your coaching session with reflecting on kind of paying attention to what's happening around you in the moment?
Yes, definitely. And the weather does make a huge difference, and sort of stopping at all times to connect with things. If I'm working online, at the moment I tend to stay inside so that my connection is really strong. I really hope that things will improve in the future so that I can definitely go out walking as well. But because of that, it means that people can engage in whatever way works for them. So I recently had a coaching session with somebody and they were on a treadmill. And they were looking outside at this massive storm that was going on, but they were still able to move, or people cycling. So they're sort of adapting in a way that works with them. We've had all sorts of things. Do you remember when we had that big sandstorm, when it was that red dust was all over Spain and people were sort of dealing with those things, and they're moving inside. And also I've had people who their energy is just really low, and so what they've done is wrapped themselves in their favorite scarf and snuggled on a sofa and joined that way, because that's what's important. The important thing wasn't the walking, it was that they've got a different perspective and they're doing things. But when I've been out with a team or a person in real life, I quite like walking in the rain. I know it's not for everybody, but there are lots of health benefits around walking in the rain, and the air is also cleaner, and it can have quite a positive effect on you. Not for everybody, but often the sky can clear as you're out and you notice the sunshine. And then there's other ways of walking indoors. I've done some good coaching walks in the British Museum, for example, and sort of going around and engaging with objects there that represent values or experiences. And then there's other places like Barbican High walks. They're really good for sort of indoor, outdoor. And yeah, that is part of the fun, isn't it? Figuring it out, where will you go? Because then you've had an adventure, you've had an experience, and that sticks with you. And I've noticed, I remember somebody saying, I don't remember that much of what happened, but I remember the feeling, and it stuck with them. And that's what you need. It's sort of getting into your body. That's how you make change, isn't it? Because it really is a visceral experience. So yeah, the weather is not always that great, but we can definitely work around it.
That just reminded me of a quote. I think it's from Maya Angelou. She says, it's not what you say, but it's how you make people feel. And that's not 100% the quote, but the gist of it. And like you said, they don't necessarily remember, but they remembered how they felt and the feeling that it gave them. And that is so powerful. It's not necessarily remembering everything that happened on the walk, but how they felt afterwards, and that feeling that they carried with them. So resilience is one of my sort of favorite topics. It's closely connected to confidence, which is what I do a lot with confidence. And I'm noticing more and more how the two connect. And one of the things that you mentioned quite a bit is that connection, that getting people to connect, to join in, like you said, wrap themselves up in their lovely warm blanket, but still connected, still participated, was still there. And connection is so important for resilience. Whether we connect with a community, whether we're connecting with family, whether it's, well, the ideal way of connecting is actually face to face, because then it's all the happy hormone and dopamine, oxytocin, that's it. Oxytocin, so that connection that we get, that those hormones that we get, those feelings that we get when we actually connect physically with others in the same sort of room or environment or something. But one thing that I'm really starting to pay attention to or dig into very much is connection, is this not feeling isolated. I'm an introvert, and my go-to place is away from people. I like to isolate myself or have solitude. I know there's a difference between isolation and solitude, but my first instinct is separate myself from people, from connecting. And it's been an interesting journey for myself in actually consciously making an effort to connect with others, whether face-to-face or online. And I love how you are very much focusing on that connection. I know it's like, duh, it's resilience, of course, but it is something that over the last few years, it's become a real issue, this lack of connection. And I really love how you are bringing that back, how you are finding a way to reconnect us or reconnect your clients with you or with others within the group, and even with nature. I mean, Lenka loves her walks. She goes off into the Czech mountains and, beautiful scenery that she's got. I'm in Suffolk. It's flat and grey most of the time. It's not inspiring to go outside into nature at all. But it's having that connection with something that's not just us being alone or us being in isolation. So I'd love you to, if you could really elaborate on the power of connecting, on why is it important for resilience? Why can't we just all sit in our, especially as introverts, why can't we just sit in our little office and just be totally on our own all day? I mean, come on, I'm not hurting anyone, am I? But what is the value of connecting? Why? I'm going to use the word should, and I know the shoulding all over ourselves is not on, but I think in this case, I'm going to get away with it. So you can tell me if I'm wrong, but why should we find a way to connect with others? Why should we go out and connect with nature? What's the point of doing this to build resilience? What's the point? So maybe if you can just really share that, especially with our listeners who we hear the word resilience thrown about, but really they might not understand how important or how powerful resilience is. So can you just share a little bit about this whole rambling that I've just done? I'm happy to break it down for you, but basically the power of connection.
Yeah, of course. Maybe it's rather than should, maybe it's why do we need connection? I think it's that it's that human, isn't it? It's that basic. And who is it who said hella other people? And so I think it is like, oh, it seems really tiring, and we're increasingly living in a world where we are avoiding connection. And so that we can have things how we like them, with the sounds we like and the space that we like. And we're losing something. We're feeling quite isolated from it. And I'm thinking from what you're saying as well, that when things get tough, your instinct is to withdraw and retreat. And yes, that is part of an introvert thing, but it's also part of a confidence thing, as you're saying as well. That sort of, the worse we feel, the less we feel able to share that with other people. And when we're at home or online, we're living in a world of the shiny social media where everything is great and people are doing wonderful things, and it makes it even harder to say, oh, I'm not feeling great. Or, you know, and it doesn't even have to be a huge mental health issue. It can be, this is a bad day. But I suppose it made me think about your question, why that has been so important to me specifically. And I suppose I have two major events that happened in my life, in my adult life, that impacted me. One of them is that I had breast cancer when I was 34. So I was quite young, quite unexpected. I had 3 small children under 5 at the time, and I had treatment for a year, and it was really tough, as you could imagine. I was very ill. My world had to completely stop. And it was so a connecting, wonderful experience at the same time. I felt really part of communities, and in a way, it was a bit different to other things. So people expect you to feel rubbish. So they say less stupid things to you, I suppose, about what you're going through. They don't expect you to be all great. And I had art therapy in a group. That was so good and so creative. We had great conversations, and I made some wonderful friends. I remember going to radiotherapy, and which was quite a painful experience, and you go every day. It's completely exhausting. And I had a friend who was the same age as my mum. She made me laugh so much that the nurses came and told us off. And so, you know, we were just upsetting people and we had to stop laughing. And it got us through, just laughing, sharing experiences, talking to each other, but also being able to say, I can't talk now, I'm too tired, or, you know, I can't come. And I realized very early in the cancer treatment that keeping that sort of emotional strength and my own sanity is what would get me through, and I would be able to cope with everything that came after that. And so connection was just absolutely fundamental in keeping me going and keeping me able to do that. And I met people that I never would have done before. So that was an example where, of course, it was still difficult. I'm not saying I had connection and then it was all amazing. It was still difficult, but it just made it bearable. Then a few years later, things got very difficult in my job. I worked in higher education, and I think it's still the case now, but we just had endless restructures and it got quite difficult. People were quite stressed, quite unfriendly, and I reached the point where I took voluntary redundancy. But things got very difficult at work, to the point that I don't know, I'd have a meeting in a room and people would refuse to make eye contact with me or speak to me, or just because people were so upset. Or I'd go to a meeting and somebody hadn't told me something fundamental that I needed to know for the meeting. So you ended up things being really difficult. And I was there for 13 years and I'd set up the department. But by the time I left, I felt quite disconnected from everybody. And years later, I have talked to people who also went through very difficult times and really understood what was happening for them. But we lost sight of each other during the experience. And that made me feel so alone, so isolated with it, as if I was the only one who wasn't coping with this. And I certainly wasn't at my best as I was going through it. I wasn't the friendliest. And those two major experiences have really driven my interest in connection, that knowing that even when we've lost sight of each other and things are very difficult, there is a moment where you can go, what actually happened for you? Oh, I felt the same. Or I didn't feel like that. I thought everybody felt like this, but they don't. They feel like something else. So connection is very important on so many different levels, but I think connection is how we get through difficult times. It's how we survive tough situations, because it keeps us going. It keeps us having that sense of belonging and that we are important to each other, and then we can cope with far more. Yeah.
And just following on connection, is over the last, well, in 2020, everybody was separated and totally isolated and disconnected from everything. And even though it's 4 years down the road, well, going into 4 years, people are still really struggling to find that connection again, to reconnect, to want to go out. And it's slowly happening. It is slowly getting, starting to get more face-to-face networkings, or the Walker network. That's a big one. But I often do hear people say, I really find it difficult to get out again, or I'm so used to being in my own space that I don't necessarily, why should I go out again? Or what's the point of doing it? Whereas pre-COVID, or we would have just gone out because it's what we did. You just did it. And it's something that I am noticing, as I'm sure I've mentioned, the connection thing is something that I'm really looking into. So I'm talking to people about it. In your experience and with the people that you're working with, and as a resilience coach, how are you encouraging people to really find that energy to reconnect, to realize that as humans we need that connections? We are pretty much pack animals. We like to be part of a tribe. We are not by nature isolated. We are by nature wanting to be part of a community, a part of a tribe, whether it's family, friends, whatever it is. You can, student or whatever. What have you noticed over the past 4 years with the reconnecting with people? Yeah, how do you just encourage people to reconnect, whether they need your coaching or it's just finding that element or that energy to, like, hey, maybe I need to go to that party or to that walk, or to go see some of my friends, meet up with some friends who I haven't seen in 4 years because we do it all on Zoom. So why meet in a coffee shop? We can just hop onto Zoom. So can you just share a little bit about how we can encourage people to reconnect?
Sure. Yeah, before the pandemic, our default was seeing people, wasn't it? Or having a phone call or something. So at least you're kind of moving around. And our default has become the online conversation. And I think, like we were saying before, it's hard work dealing with other people. And it can be tiring or boring or all of those sorts of things. And yet how absolutely fundamental it is, how much it is needed. And we live far apart from each other as well. So there's the journey to take into account as well. But yeah, what it was making me think of, I have had this situation before where there are people who need some support with their resilience. They want to talk to me, but they're too busy and they're too stressed and they have too much going on. And it's often the case that once they come, either going out with their team or their group or coming out with me, there's always a moment where somebody says to me, I really needed this. and yeah, it's very hard to have that moment when you're busy in the doing things and keeping going, and the sort of constantness of it. But yeah, how do I encourage people to do it? I think that I'm just sort of thinking about Esther Perel. I'm sure you listen to Esther Perel, and she was talking recently on a podcast about how we have lost the ability to disagree with each other comfortably and to manage conflict and to have those conversations. So I think part of what has happened is first of all, there's the getting stuck, as I've talked before, in the being so busy and doing all those sorts of things, so that we forget that we need it, that we forget to get off the track of it. But then once we have done that, we need to have the confidence to have the conversations about what we need. So I think that comes up quite a bit as well. So I recently had a client who they go out and they see a friend, but the friend wants to go to very loud, noisy bars because they really enjoy that. And it's very hard to say, that isn't what I want to do. I really want to see you, but I want to do it in this kind of way. You know, this is what would make me feel good. Maybe that's what would make them feel good as well. So I think on the one hand, it's having that conversation to help people slow down, check in with what they need, connect with people because they need it. But on the other hand, it's also boundaries again. What is it that we can do to make this conversation comfortable? Do we have to meet in this place? Do we have to do this? No, talk about it, ask for what we need. And I think we find that really hard. And then we end up having more, it's more resentful or it's more difficult when we see people. So yeah, those are some of the things that I encourage, as well, of course, as having walking meetings. Get on the phone and get outside and have that conversation. You don't even have to go and see them, but don't have a Zoom meeting, have a phone call instead. Could you go to a co-working space and meet your colleagues that way? So I think it's also thinking about those different ways that we can connect with each other that make us feel good.
And that's such a good point, that it's not just for this coaching, it's not just for the resilience work that you do, that changing the scenery, going out can be so helpful for individuals, for groups of individuals who potentially collaborate, for teams. I remember back in the day, we would go for brain walks, kind of a creativity walk. We would have some prompts. We would have a facilitator with us as part of, being freelancers. We were all independent, working on our individual things, but as part of us being in this networking group or in this co-working space, we would every now and then have a brain walk. We just pretty much just go out and have a facilitator who gives you very random prompts, sometimes cards, sometimes some instructions, sometimes some music, sometimes some exercises, to then help you brainstorm anything for your work, be it new content, be it overcoming obstacles, just getting some fresh air. I'm curious, do you have some specific tools that you can take people through, be it some prompt cards, be it some exercise, something that we could kind of have a think about, that we could then bring into our businesses, into our teams, that we could start implementing ourselves as well?
Oh, like a sort of specific activities or tasks? Yes, I do. So it's very basic, but I always use the quantum flirt idea, that sort of sense of, well, we can do it now if you would like. So if you need something to, let's ask the question, what do you need now? Because I find that's a really good place to start for everything. And especially when there are so many things that you need to do. So helping to focus on that. So if you start with your eyes closed, so this could be wherever you're at. Obviously, if you're walking around, don't close your eyes, just look down. And then you're going to open your eyes and look around as if you have just arrived from outer space. And this is the first time that you are seeing the world around you. And you've got that question lightly held, what do I need right now? And then just see what grabs your attention. And there is often something that's sort of calling for you. It could be a view, it could be an object, it could be something moving. Did anything pop up for you, Lenka?
Yes, two tiny little fishes in our aquarium that are usually hiding away, but right now they're kind of stuck and sucking on the glass. I can kind of see them just behind my laptop.
Oh, wonderful. What colour are they?
Orange.
Orange fish. And does that mean anything for you? Is that reminding you of anything that you need right now?
I think it's for them because they're often like hiding and they're not being visible. It's a time to retreat and to not be visible and not be in front of a screen and not be in front of people and not be doing things necessarily. It's sometimes to be like, it's okay to take a step back, which hasn't been something I have done this year, even though it feels like this year. Since I had a good hibernation over the Christmas, but it really feels like the beginning of the year was like, start now and run. So yeah, maybe the fish are reminding me it's okay to retreat.
Yeah, be more fish, be more like your fish and retreat. So yeah, that's something that's really helpful, and it's a nice, comfortable way to have that conversation. And again, it sticks in your mind. You sort of go away, it's very visible, and you think of it. Also, I have quite a few like little cards and that sort of thing. I have a compass that has different items that you need, and people put that in their palm, and then they can move it around and go, do I need sleep, connection, to be present? And that just helps people plug into that. Boundaries, you can have lots of fun with boundaries, being outside, even just physically taking up space because people are in one position at the same time, and noticing the boundaries around you and how there are many different ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be hard, solid, confrontational type boundaries. It could be a soft hat on a baby's head, for example, reminding you different ways to do boundaries. And then there's all sorts of things like I was saying about values and finding objects and elements and having those conversations, or walking in certain ways. Yeah, I'm always sort of bringing different things, and I give people postcards as well so that they can make notes afterwards, because obviously if you're walking around you don't want something flimsy, and then you can just capture thoughts to use afterwards. Floating things in puddles. I did do that a lot. Don't go near puddles if you can, they're a bit disgusting. But sort of things you want to let go, writing them on paper, folding them into boats, and then floating them on little ponds or something. That's quite a moving experience to do with. I had quite effective one of that with a team that had been through a really difficult time and needed to just move on from it. So yeah, I use lots of those sorts of things, but the quantum flirt is always useful.
I love that. One experience I had with coaching that was kind of a similar, it was indoors, but it was very visceral, was a goal setting where we literally kind of visualized the goal and then kind of stepped on and like moved on the floor as talking, kind of taking a step further and a step further and going to the end goal and then reflecting back. So I totally get that bringing in the body and be it touching objects, smelling things, hearing things, moving the body, feeling the space can really help us to, as you said, kind of embed and remember a bit more to what we've been through, rather than there's so much in our minds. We all feel like we need more focus, we need more clarity, we don't have enough headspace, we're overwhelmed, and just all in our head. So a lot of what I'm hearing from there, it's really bringing in the body and allowing, the senses and the embodiment happen and allow us to process things, to open things, to remember things, to carry further things.
Yeah, very much. It's making me think of another thing that is quite useful. When you're trying to make a decision, crossroads are wonderful. And taking a client and asking them to label each route, what would this represent? What would that represent? Which way do you want to walk? And you often find them going, no, don't want to go up there. And you're like, okay, you've got a lot of this information there. And I just think we don't have enough space day to day generally. I think so much of coaching it's not about really complicated rocket science, brand new stuff. It's all stuff that we know, but the job of the coach is to really give people that space to think it through, to feel connected around it, not feel alone, and to focus on what they want to do next. And then you're just trying to pull out different activities that work for different people. Some people are real metaphor people, other people, that's not working for them at all. And so then they can just use it. But yeah, it sticks. And I think that's another thing about stress that we talk about a bit less, is how physical it is. It physically affects us and it is really impacting on us. So if you are moving physically, you're obviously changing your body's response so that you can think. Yeah, it's so wonderful going out wandering and using that to think.
And just going back a little bit to, you were talking about sort of, looking after yourself and just giving yourself that space or that time, or just finding ways. And resilience is the nuts and bolts of it is about coping with change, dealing with change, and finding ways to move forward. And to be resilient is not just surviving, but actually thriving through the change. But I think also part of resilience is, or helping you to fill your resilient bucket, so to speak, is to have that self-care, to be selfish and look after yourself. And we've had guests talking about self-care, and we've also just released a podcast on talking about this guilt of being selfish. If I'm looking after myself, I'm being selfish. Oh, I shouldn't really be doing that. I need to be giving my energy elsewhere. But this is taking out of your resilience bucket instead of putting it into your resilience bucket. Whereas when you start to give yourself that space, or whether it's coming to you to have a coach help and support you, or whether it's going out into nature, or sitting on the couch with a comfy scarf on or blanket, connecting, you building up your resilience. You almost putting something into your bucket so that when that change does happen, which it does, I mean, a lot of things happen, is you are better able to cope with it instead of just feeling like you're out of control, or feeling like stuff is happening to me and I don't know what to do. Where it's like, okay, this is happening now. All right, let's make a plan. What do we do? What step 1, step 2, step 3, whatever it is. And looking after ourselves, or being selfish and having that self-care is from what I'm hearing from you, is it's really important to build that resilience, to have that energy to keep going, instead of just feeling like, I can't do this anymore, and that low energy where anything feels like, oh my God, I just can't do this. I'm just gonna, in my case, must probably sit on the couch with a tub of ice cream. That's all I can do. But when we are building that up, and we are being the selfish human beings that we are allowed to be, then we actually building up that resilience for when we need it, for when something happens at work, with the family. And it doesn't have to be big things. It can be just something small, like somebody cutting you off in traffic, or somebody being late for a meeting. I mean, these are changes that can happen, which if we don't have our resilience, it's like, okay, that's it, the world's ended, oh my God, and just anger and emotions going all over the place. So I really do appreciate that you are giving us permission to build our resilience. Let's go be selfish and have that care for ourselves, and really start to put us first. I mean, like you said, we don't have time. I mean, there's, notifications going off on phones, there's bosses, there's clients, there's jobs, there's traffic, there's stuff just going on. There's no just, let's be slow today. What's wrong with you? So can you share some ways that, and I know you've given some really good tools, but it's almost, can you give us permission to be selfish?
100%, yes, definitely start with that. And I think that's like I was saying, this resilience dynamic model sort of has a bottom where the energy you need is the complete opposite of the energy that you have, a sort of state of breakdown in a way. And then you're moving up to a middle place of break even, where the energy you have is matching what you need. And that is a state of coping often. You're sort of getting through the days, but if anything else comes, you're just going to tip over. And then a sort of higher level of that is a bounce back one, that sense of, yeah, I'm really doing it, it's really good. And then crash, you go on holiday and you're ill because it's not matching. And then obviously what you're aiming for is this wonderful world where you have more energy than what you actually need. And being selfish is, God, wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody was selfish, if everybody was taking care of themselves, taking care of their needs, able to talk to you about what they needed as well. And that there was a wonderful quote that I came across a while ago saying that for any person who has coaching or therapy, something like at least 8 people directly in their orbit are positively impacted by that, because it makes sense, doesn't it? If you're dealing with somebody who is taking care of themselves and they're feeling resilient and they're feeling quite positive, you feel good. And you're learning from them, you're getting some of that role modeled wisdom and way to behave as well. So it's 100% about that. But yeah, that very low level of energy, of resilience, is a massive warning to ourselves, really. It's all the lights going off on your dashboard, and that can sometimes be an issue when people are coming to coaching or whatever, when they're actually down here feeling really low energy, and they're thinking that they should be doing this, that, and the other, and you're saying you need a sleep and you need a biscuit and you need to just have a hug or whatever it is. And just being aware that we are all wherever we are at, and also none of us can be wonderfully resilient all the time, because life is coming at us. We are going to get ill, we are going to have a background where we may be a bit more fragile, a bit more vulnerable. And that is something that I'm talking to my clients about all the time. Wherever you're at is where you're at. It's okay. It doesn't feel okay some of the time, but it's okay. And fighting against reality is not going to be helping. Sort of say, well, I should be able to. Yeah, but you can't. So it's better to take care of yourself, and then you'll be able to do stuff. So a lot of the resilience work is that sort of energy based. So perhaps quite physical. Are you sleeping? Are you moving? Going for a walk? Having energy? Those sorts of conversations. But then on the other end, it is, of course, about setting those boundaries and having conversations, but it's also laughing at ourselves and taking things a bit more lightly. It's also about letting go of stuff if it doesn't really matter, celebrating things, recognizing how far we've come. And it's a particularly wonderful thing to get into, because resilience is a life's work, really, for ourselves and for our clients. And there's always something that we can look at or think about. And I know for me, having come from a place of having been very physically ill, having very difficult times at work, having raised 3 children, we're now teenagers now with a lot of things going on, and having that sense of resilience, stuff that I wasn't taught at school or when I was at work, around taking care of yourself first, not in a, how would you say it, not in a negatively selfish way. I suppose we worry about being selfish if we think that means that it looks like we don't care about other people. So I think that's not what it is. It's about taking care of yourself in a way so that you are able to take care of people if that's what you need to do, or whatever it is that is important for you. And I don't think we learn these things. I don't think we learn how to take care of ourselves or think about it. And it's hugely changed my life and my relationships and those of clients, because it's really important.
There's so much we can unpack, but one thing that really my brain goes to is we will have lots of limiting beliefs and kind of mindset that is not helpful. The inner chatter that's telling us, you're not worth it, you need to focus on making money, you need to, show up for clients, you are not, deserving of taking this time off, sleep is for when you're dead, and that kind of a beliefs around, how sleep is important or not, or if we're not prioritizing the hustle, the hard work, the things that we are not performing, and be walking or meditation or coaching, it's a waste of time or waste of money. So I presume there's a lot for you also to do around these limiting beliefs, this mindset of like just people simply believing that these things are important and that they don't have to take too long, they don't have to take over their life, but making small changes on daily basis, weekly basis can really have an impact in changing not only what we do, but what we think about those things.
I think I would come at it from a slightly different way, sort of thinking that maybe it's not about fully changing our beliefs and our mindset. Maybe it's thinking, this has got you this far. There's a reason why you do things a certain way. There's a reason why you think about these things, and they are usually, okay, 90% they are good. It's because it protected you. It's because it moved you forward, because it helped you deal with whatever situation you're in. And I think that's what I was saying about sort of being gently challenging. I think we have to go, yeah, this has got you here. This has worked for you in lots of ways. And changing what we believe is hard work. It's really difficult, because these things, we hold on to them. They feel like they are ourselves, that this is who we are. And we know that's not the case, because we've changed even just in this time we've been speaking. We've all got a little older, a little different, we're changing all of the time. So I think I would start with that. Okay, it's okay what you think. What do you want to change? What do you want to shift? And then focusing in on that one or two things that will make that big difference, because it's not about changing what people believe. And sometimes what matters to us is being there for other people. Sometimes that matters to us hugely. And so you can't come to somebody who feels like that and say, you can't take care of other people. That's not the important thing. You need to take care of yourself, because that's not going to work for them. That's not aligning with their values and what's important. So I think, yeah, there's definitely thinking about those beliefs, but it's maybe more, my role is more about raising awareness of how you are thinking and what's going on for you, and then thinking about what's that shift that you want to make. And sometimes something that really helps is asking somebody to be a detective in their life, like go back, and when you have situations, see what's upsetting you, what's draining you, what happened when this went on. And then also copying other people or just observing other people. How did they do it? How did somebody that you feel has those same values as you, how did they have those conversations? And so sort of, I find, again, that just gives something practical to do as well. And I think we do need that when we come from coaching, rather than how can we change how we think or something. Just, well, what do they do? Could you try this? What's going on for you? How's this worked for you so far? Where's it come from? Because that's not a coaching conversation, but just sort of, that's more of a therapy conversation, but sort of thinking, what do you want to shift?
Well, speaking of raising awareness, thank you so much for raising our awareness and bringing us into this wonderful space of thinking and, exploring how changing where we are, going outside more, going on walks, or having conversations in different environments can really help us explore our health and well-being and what may be where we might be stuck, and build our resilience. I could talk forever about these topics. That's why we have this podcast. We love having these conversations, but also we want to be mindful of the time that you're generously giving to us. So before we wrap up, is there a final piece of advice or an insight or a practical tip that you would like to share with our listeners and viewers?
I think that taking a breath is always absolutely fundamental. I know it's a really simple and obvious thing, but whenever you're feeling that you may be stuck or you may be busy, sometimes it's a bit hard to get out for that walk and go for a wander, but you can always take that breath, and that sort of taking the deepest, slowest breath you have all day long is definitely something to keep in mind.
That's a perfect finish, which could get me into another rabbit hole of talking about breath, because I love talking about breath and I love breathing and I love learning more about breath. But thank you so much for being here, for sharing light on this interesting way of mixing things together, of bringing in coaching into slightly different environments to really help people to change their state and change the situation and make how little small, how big decisions and adjustments that they need. If someone listening was like, that's cool, I think I may need a little bit of guidance on my walks. Maybe I want to listen to someone on my walks. Maybe I want some encouragement, even if I'm not walking or if I'm on a treadmill, or maybe someone looking to get some support for themselves or for their teams. Where they can find you. Tell us how they can connect with you, please.
I will do, but first, thank you so much for the conversation and the time and space to talk about these things and to meet your fish as well, Link. Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn. I also have a website. You can email me, which I think you will share the details, and you can walk with me in person for one-to-one coaching and for teams and groups online or in person. And I'm also starting a small group coaching. So that's for 4 people doing 4 workshops. So they get that individual time, but they also get to connect with each other. But a great way to connect with me, I have a monthly mailing list where I send out a 5-minute recording that I go out into the woods or wherever I am and record something, so you can walk with me and listen to that. And I have open walks that are free for people to join and just come along and try it as well.
That's wonderful. We'll definitely put all your links into the description. And thank you so much for being here. And a question to our listeners and viewers. What do you think about the topic that we talked about today? Do you have any golden nuggets that you took away from it, or any questions? We always love hearing back from you. So please let us know in the comments or drop us a DM or an email, because we are here for you. We're bringing these guests for you to help you, to enrich you, to allow you to find more life in your life. So thank you so much for listening, for viewing. Anise, again, thank you so much for being here.
If you enjoyed listening to our conversation, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe. We would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and write a short review.